G'day and welcome to another big edition of the RDFNL Footy Show. Thanks to Ontime Delivery Solutions. My name's Yeendy. I'm joined by Tara and Murray. Thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me.
Certainly, we're great to have the split round teams. We'll be very happy to have a bit of a break for those that can, but a big opportunity for some big games this weekend for the crowd to get out there and enjoy it.
It is, and we've got the local derby, so that's probably the biggest attraction crowd. You get that one. Obviously, Macedon's another good-looking game there, but I think you'll have quite a few people get down to watch Sunbury Kangaroos and Rupertswood.
Yeah, exactly. That's just the way the fixture was crafted beautifully, which is very exciting. It's sort of weird with this particular round because it is a 7-game round.
It is. Obviously, we've got 4 this week, and then we've also got the catch-up game from round 1 from Romsey and Diggers Rest. So Romsey and Diggers Rest don't get a break over this period. They do play both rounds, but then we'll finally get a true indication of where every team sits on the ladder. So we've been talking about that Romsey and Diggers Rest have had a game in hand for a long time, but we'll get a clear indication of where they actually sit and who's sitting where.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna put my league hat on here and say congratulations to the clubs involved in the enabling the Diggers and Romsey game to sort of take place. I know. I think it was a Diggers
was Wood End Heskett.
Yeah. So we had Lansfield and Wood End Heskett were scheduled to be involved in games, and they were able to sort of switch them around to ensure that we can have Diggers and Romsey sort of take place for this sort of split round area, which is great.
Yeah, no, most definitely, and it sort of saved an issue. We probably looked at the other one was the Queen's birthday weekend, but a lot of people had already made plans, and it's better than both these two teams just having to settle for 2 points. I think they both want to get out on the park and get that win.
Absolutely. As we turn our attention to the first game, we've got Wood End Heskett and Broadford. The Roos coming off their best performance of the year, while the Hawks coming off one of their most disappointing.
It is. This is a must-win for Wood End Heskett. They've now lost 5 on the trot, and I think they've probably lost 6 out of 7 or something like that. Yeah, they haven't had after getting off to a flyer, they've really struggled. And look, they dropped a match last week they would have penciled in as a win, and probably one that most people expected them to win. So now they're taking on Broadford, bottom side, undefeated. Wood End has to get back to doing what they were doing in the opening rounds and start finding that form if they want to play finals.
I think anything less than, I don't know, a 20-goal win would probably be disappointing there for the Hawks. So.
Look, I don't think the margin is what it is. It's more about making sure they're playing the right football and getting back to what they were doing earlier in the season. And that's probably the key. If that results in a 20-goal margin, so be it. But I think, the key is for them making sure they're following to the structures and the plans and all of that so they can get back on that winning note.
Love to see how Al Ray and Tom Gawthrop sort of work together in terms of how many goals they can sort of kick between them this week, because that's something Ray has been kicking goals. Gawthrop has sort of been another target, but I'd love to see both of them maybe kick sort of 4 or 5 each, just to get that confidence back within the duo.
Look, and obviously you mentioned that Al Ray kicked 5 goals last week in the loss and was named the Hawks' best. So you've got that. Look, as long as they're getting a number of different options, you don't want to be relying on 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And that's why early in the season they had a lot of midfielders coming forward and kicking goals, and they've got to get back to that. They need probably 4 or 5 players with multiple goals to show they've got that depth and that range that will match it with those top sides.
And given the Broadford's been in pretty good touch on the basis of last week's effort, I think they'll come in feeling pretty confident, and it's not going to be an easy game for the Hawks to try and get the structures and what they want in place.
It isn't, and as obviously I think Broadford played their best match last week against Lansfield. They won the second half, so that's, even though they didn't get the points, that's a massive confidence booster for that side, that they can actually win a half of football, and that's probably the first time they've done it all season.
Lansfield versus Diggers Rest. This is going to be an intriguing contest, I think.
Look, I think it's going to be intriguing. I think Diggers Rest will still have an easy win. I saw them play last week, and look, they could have quite easily got the win against Rupertswood, where you've got Lansfield's coming off two successive wins, but Diggers Rest is a very different proposition to Broadford and Rockbank, who they've beaten in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and Lansfield probably lack that experience and depth that the Boroughs do have, but I think it'd be a good challenge for them, sort of assessing where they're at the moment and what they probably need in terms of players for next year.
Yeah, definitely, and they're assessing players. They keep bringing in some youngsters, giving them opportunities, and you can sort of see where they fit into the side. Whether they look to bring a lot of players in next year, I'm not sure, or they stick with the local approach and build on that for 2-3 years. Diggers Rest has shown they are a side that has depth. I think they were missing 4 or 5 out last weekend. They had Tom Gleeson was still overseas. I think he's due back soon. You had Brent Tucky pulled out with illness. BJ Kilty is in a moon boot at the moment as well, so I expect him to miss a few weeks, and I think there was a couple of others missing on the weekend, so they've still got players to come back in as well.
How do you think Diggers Rest will attack this game?
Look, I think it'll be a big Diggers Rest win. How convincing, I I don't know. They have been a little bit up and down. There's been a couple of matches we thought they would have bigger margins than what they have, but then earlier in the season we saw them absolutely dominate these teams. So look, it'll be a Diggers Rest big margin, but how much I'm not sure.
Down the road, Redbacks are playing host to Macedon. This could be an interesting contest.
Look, probably on paper, this is the most interesting match of the weekend. You've got Macedon, who is coming off a loss, versus Romsey, who's looking to seal that 6th position, and he's hit some good form, obviously, against some of the lower sides. But for them, it's the test and trying to get a win against one of these top sides. That's what they haven't been able to do. They
haven't got that scalp yet, have they?
They haven't. They haven't beaten any of the top 5 teams. So if they can get one here, it would be really, really important. Obviously, for the Cats, they're coming off 2 really, really close results. They've got the points in one, and they didn't get the points in the other. They could have quite easily gone 2-0 or been 0-2 in those 2 weeks. So for them, look, they're playing some good football. You don't always get the results in those close ones, but they're playing really, really good football.
Yeah, exactly. And Dan Markworth played exceptional footy last week. He was their best player, but he showed a lot of explosion as he was sort of coming through the midfield. And Johnson, they've brought him to the club. He's a good, solid target. I know they've got a few injuries. They've still got a few to come back, but I think there's still... They showed a lot of great promise against Riddle, and I think there's a lot to like about how they'll go in this game.
And look, and you mentioned they lost to Riddle. It was by 2 points. And Riddle's been the most formed team in the competition since round 4. They haven't lost since round 3. So obviously they've gone down to 2 points to the most informed team in the competition. And arguably, from a lot of people, would say Riddle is the best team in the competition, despite there's not much between that top 5. But a lot of people rate Riddle that high. So they'd be disappointed, but not overly disappointed with that loss.
When you've had a 9-game winning streak and you've beaten sides pretty well and you're blooding youth at the same time, it's sort of hard to see why we couldn't back them as how well they're going.
Exactly, but then on their day, you look, the Cats can get over the line. We saw that round 1. Obviously, Riddle weren't quite up and going then, but the Cats got over the line then. So, look, I think Macedon will bounce back with a comfortable win this week.
Yeah, and I still think Romsey, they'll be competitive, and they've got a lot of young kids coming through and working it really well. As we look to the last game, this could be... I think this is going to be an intriguing game, this one. Rupert's Wood and Sunbury Kangaroos. I just envision just a hard slog, at least for the first half, and then the rest of the game will sort itself out in the second.
And that's how it played out the first time these two teams played. It was a really good first half, and then Rupert's Wood were able to kick away in the second half. And it's sort of every time these two teams meet, no matter where they are on the ladder, they get up to play each other. It's that local rivalry. They want to be the top team in Sunbury. Yeah. So, look, I'm expecting a good, interesting match. Probably not a massive blowout, but I'm expecting, if Sunbury Kangaroos were competitive for a half against Poland, and I'm expecting at least that, if not more, against Rupert's Wood as well.
This is like the third and final game of the sort of the crosstown rivalry. Like the last few weeks, we had Sunbury Kangaroos play Diggers, and we've had Rupert's Wood play Diggers Rest. Now we've got these two teams who come out the other side and they're ready to take on each other.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's always quite an interesting one. And Sunbury Kangaroos were obviously disappointing against Diggers Rest. They didn't kick a goal until the last quarter. But they bounced back against Wallen and showed some good signs. If they continue to play like that, they'll definitely push Rupert's Wood. Yeah,
exactly right there. Well, that's just the 4 games that we've got for this weekend. We've got another 3 the following week, which we'll discuss next week. Thanks to our friends at Ontime Delivery Solutions, and thanks to our mate Poundy for joining us again as another special guest. Tara, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to catching up with you next week.
Thanks for having me.